Hello and welcome back to another episode of Blurble Reasoning. Today we are going to be talking about Mistborn Era 2 Book 3, The Bands of Mourning, and we will be going in with full spoilers, so if you're not fully read up, I do plan on making a spoiler-free video about the entire series as a whole so far, and kind of like, if you should read it or if not, but otherwise, stick around for that, and if not, hang about for this. Now, I think it's important to understand the context I went into this book with, and that's having looked at the publication dates of each book of Era 2 and gone, it looks like it was originally meant to be a trilogy, and then later on we added a final book, and so I kind of went into this book almost expecting it to be a quote-unquote final book of a trilogy. And so in that regard, I actually think I did myself a disservice because I was expecting it to be a little bit more climactic and important than it actually was. Which isn't to say it wasn't in many ways, but I think I was too preoccupied with this book a little bit going, wait, does this feel like an ending? Is this meant to be the end of a trilogy? Because if so, it kind of feels a little weak in that regard. And then there's an author's note at the very end of the book being like, and our characters will return in the lost metal. And I'm like, oh, right, okay, I guess not. But that's not to say I didn't enjoy this book at all. No, I had a brilliant time with this book. It was really fun to explore the Lord Ruler's wristbands and kind of view them through this new perspective of like, well, what actually were they? Because they still didn't really function by the rules. Like, we were told in Era 1, oh, he was so powerful because he was able to compound, allomancy with ferrochemical abilities, and that is still true, but also, like, what was the deal with those bands of his? And it turns out that they're actually this device which allows anyone to use the abilities stored within, whether they have allomantic and ferrochemical abilities or not, because if you have all of the powers of allomancy and ferrochemy, you can store investiture, which basically just means the ability to grant people powers. At least that's my current understanding of it. I'm not gonna lie, the magic systems are becoming more advanced, more convoluted, and there are times when I'm like, wait, hang on, what's possible again? Wait, hang on, how are we doing this again? Like, I'm not sitting here confused throughout the whole book, but I won't lie, when it came to how the airship functioned, I kind of tuned out a little bit because I was like, alright, I get that this makes technical sense, but I'm starting to get a little bit lost in the source. This might be because I'm also listening to it as an audiobook. I think if I was reading this as a physical book or an ebook, I would be able to take the time to stop and scrutinize. But when you're listening to it as an audiobook, it's a little bit more difficult because your only real option is to rewind by increments of 30 seconds, and when you're kind of like listening while you're doing other things as well, it can be a bit like, I'm not gonna stop and do that. As a related aside, I've been wondering if I'm going to read the Malazan book series as audiobooks due to their length, or physical books or ebooks because of the ability to stop and assess what's going on and flick back and so forth. And based on my reading of Mistborn Era 2, I think I have now decided with Malazan, if I do read that series, I'm gonna have to have physical words in front of me because I've heard it can be quite complex and it doesn't, like, give you a minute. So if nothing else, this book helped me come to that conclusion. But I'm not too bothered about this because I do have a grasp of the fundamentals, and I know going forwards, this system is going to be explained to me a few more times because that's how Brandon Sanderson tends to do these things. And ultimately, it's not super important on a very first read through to know all the ins and outs of the magic system. It's just fun for theory crafting and being like, I wonder if this works this way, and then being rewarded for being right. It's not integral to the narrative itself, and I think when I do finish reading through The Lost Metal and I am fully up to date on all things Mistborn, I may go hunting for some kind of, explainer videos online of like everything we know about Scadrial magic so far. But yes, the main additions, or I guess explorations of the magic system in this book were to do with identity and investiture. If I'm correct, storing investiture is the storing of the power itself, and storing identity is what allows people to tap that power even if they themselves do not I might be wrong on that front. It might just be investiture, and identity is what you use to kind of do the translation magic. Like I said, it's getting a little complicated, but I love that because Final Fantasy XIV, I would argue, also has hard magic systems, and I remember working out the things that were possible ahead of time in that game and having a great time with it. In terms of the actual story itself, this felt like a very Indiana Jones, like we're two rivals hunting for the same relic, and the stakes are very high because the other lot, they want to use this technology for evil, and so we're basically trying to get it out of their hands. I should actually say, I'm not a big Indiana Jones guy. I don't remember any of the movies. I watched them when I was very young. I'm assuming that's how it goes. Maybe it's less altruistic than that. Maybe it should just belong in a museum. But that's how it worked in this book, damn it. It was fun to see Wax's uncle take center stage as the villain this time, and we're exploring Set a little bit more. In fact, this book in general just expanded the world in some really fun and interesting ways. Of course, we got the revelation with the airship about there being what we got hinted at in the... I think we got hinted at this at the end of Era 1, right? When Vin became the Ascendant Warrior for a minute, where she was like, oh wow, there's a civilization full of people to the south of this planet as well. I've been waiting for us to revisit that ever since, and yes, we finally are. I'm very excited to see that the band of people towards the south of the planet ended up being more technologically advanced instead of less. Although I will admit, when we first discovered the airship and we didn't know what it was or what its capabilities were, and it was being explained to us what it was, I was kind of picturing like a commercial airliner, like from modern eras, because it is really difficult to provide an accurate description of a thing that the characters do not know what they're looking at, but us as the audience should. But in the end, I settled on more of like a Final Fantasy airship. The entire time when they were on the airship flying around, all I could hear in my head was ba 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 ba. Knowing that Brandon Sanderson has played those old Final Fantasy games in his youth helps with that assertion. But yes, to get back to the overall plot, I really enjoyed, starting with Wax being like, I'm not gonna help Harmony after what he did to me. Wait a minute, you say they've got Telson? They've got my sister? Oh, god damn it, fine, I'll tag along. And then, slowly he becomes more invested, and, it's his healing arc as a character. And of course, I saw this coming from a mile away, that Telson was a part of Set and was a plant and an agent and a spy. I kind of think I was supposed to see that coming from a mile away because the idea is that Wax has a blind spot in that regard, but yeah, it was kind of tropey and obvious. I have to say, I do have a nitpick with this book, and that's that they didn't go harder into Wayne's serious, angry side. I loved that heartbreaking scene where Wayne is just holding Wax's hand as he dies, and then Wayne finally picks up a gun for the first time in the series, I guess, in his adult life or whatever, and goes hunting down Telson, and apparently shoots her in the face dead, although obviously later on we learn that she survives that because she used her freaking bloodmaker powers, which she got from her hemalurgy, I believe. I loved that. I loved all that. I'm really upset that we didn't get a reunion scene between Wax and Wayne when Wayne found that Wax had been resurrected and was alive and all that. We did later get a scene where Wax was like, hey, are you okay? You used a gun. You killed out of anger. Are you good? But I do wish we'd seen that reunion. I want to see Wayne's reaction to Wax still being alive and the horror at what he's done out of anger and stuff. I just wanted that one extra scene, and it would have been chef's kiss perfect. Because I love the relationship between Wax and Wayne, and how it's very lighthearted and jokey, but they're partners and they work together really well. But then there's that undercurrent. One of my favourite moments in this entire series has been Wayne going, Wax, check your pulse, mate. And it's this little agreed upon code phrase of Wayne being like, oh yeah, it's a thing I help him with. Sometimes he doesn't realize he's being really rude or whatever. I love that shit so much. I also wish we had seen Wayne realize that the love between Wax and Steris was real and come to finally respect Steris as a person for it, I guess. Because Wayne's entire dislike of Steris stems from the fact, I think, that he knew back in book 1 that the only reason Wax was marrying her was out of duty to his house. And so I think he detested Steris because she represented what society was doing wrong in that front, like causing his friend more pain, right? But instead, the last we hear from Wayne in this book is Wax having to tell him off for being mean to Steris. I think it would have been such a lovely arc to start this book with Wayne ruining their marriage and end this book with Wax acknowledging that he knows this and Wayne acknowledging that he wouldn't do it again or something because it's real this time, you know? But maybe that stuff comes in book 4, I don't know. Ultimately, stuff like that is why I'm giving the book a 4 out of 5, because it's a really good book. I'm having a really good time with this, but it is just little oversights like that, where I think if a book was a little bit longer, a little bit bigger in scope, we would have more time to explore the depths of these characters in a really fun way, which would add to the narrative. Another fun thing about Mistborn Era 2 so far is it seems to have a lot more Cosmere connectivity in general. And as someone who has read Elantris and has read Warbreaker and has read the first 2 Stormlight Archive books, albeit 8 years ago now, Jesus, I need to get back on that. I've been really enjoying it. There is a story in the newspaper clippings we get between chapters sometimes about someone who is fighting someone with a gun with runes etched on the side, which sounds to me like Elantris tech. Magitech, whatever you want to call it. Very curious about that. Might go back and reread that. I feel like it's something that was posed as fiction, but is actually secretly not fiction within that world. That sounds like if, you know, Allomancy evolved into a world of guns as having like aluminum bullets and stuff like that. Oh my god, now I'm saying aluminum. Aluminium. I'm British, damn it. Then I feel Elantris's same technological pathway would integrate its magic with runes on the side of guns to give them different effects. And I'm very curious about the fact that that was showing up in this book. There was also that woman who wanted Wax to consider the effect that happens when he uses his allomantic powers and ferrochemical powers together, like how he gets a little speed boost when he reduces his weight in the air? Or increases, I forget which way around it works. And that ties into the stuff we've been seeing in the Ars Arcanum at the end of the books, where they talk about the fact that, oh yes, using an allomantic and ferrochemical paired ability, I believe, together does result in a new additional effect, which is interesting. And if I remember right, Wax even utilizes that additional effect within a combat scene in this book. And then there's all the stuff going on at the end. I find it really interesting that the set group are being set up as, while they are behind a lot of the events happening in this era, they're actually going to be more important in the next era. Because or maybe even the era after that, because their goals are to be prepared for something which they expect to happen 100 years from now. And we now know that Ghostbloods, the next era, the third Mistborn era, takes place 50 years from this era. Unless there's like a 50-year time jump in the final book, which I highly doubt. And I loved that scene at the end where, you know, we see from Suit's perspective, we see from Wax's uncle's perspective when he's in prison. And he gets a visit from one of his own faceless immortals who has glowing red eyes. And he says to Suit that actually, no, we don't need lower elements of the set operation to rule civilization in our name, because we've decided we don't like where the magic is going on this planet, so we're actually just going to destroy this planet. It's getting too risky. And I mentioned Final Fantasy XIV earlier. That's Ascian AF, right? We now have this shadowy organization with these mysterious beings controlling things from behind the scenes on a, I guess, interplanetary level. That's not like one for one with Ascians, but it's, you know what I mean. I was so excited and interested when I heard that, because the world from our point of view, from Wax and Wayne's point of view, has just got bigger. We've just been introduced to the concept of other nations. And that in itself is a really fun little story quirk, being, I guess, the last nation to the party and worrying about, like, you know, are they now a target for all these other cities that know that they exist, and are they going to have to go to war and all this? And clearly we've got this threat that the entire world is going to have to band together to face, which I think, you know, it's not the most original idea, but with the depth that we are exploring these different parts of time throughout this series, which I think is probably its main selling point now, I think it's really exciting to kind of be like, look at how events progress throughout a civilization through different eras, and then how they're going to have to meet what I'm guessing is now the ultimate threat. And yes, with high cosmere connectivity, because they exist not within Scadrial but within the cosmere. Clearly, they are an organization which monitored the technological and magical developments of different worlds, and whatever's going on Scadrial is becoming too concerning. I guess they're worried that the citizens of Scadrial will become too overpowered, and so they want to just annihilate the world. There was also the revelation that I saw coming from 100 million miles away that actually what we were assuming was somehow the Lord Ruler 30 years after his death travelling south and becoming this people's leader was actually Kelsier, the survivor. The reason I saw this coming from 100,000 miles away was because I read the novella. I finally understand why you were kind of supposed to read this after the Bands of Mourning. I still regret nothing. Secret History takes place during the events of Era 1, and I think going into it with the events of Era 1 as fresh in your mind as possible is the way to go. I don't personally feel like my enjoyment of the story has been ruined by knowing that Kelsier was still a figure working behind the scenes in this world. And despite seeing it coming, it was still a revelation, and an exciting one, that the Southern People's leader, whose name I forget, ended up being him. I did really like the method with which we learned this, where Wax pulls out that coin, or he finds that his coin on the table that, by the way, Hoyd gave to him, and he realizes that it's similar to the medallions of the Southern People in that he can tap into the power within, and it's a metal mind, which means he basically gets to see someone else's memories. Given that Kelsier appears with one spiked eye and one normal eye, it does now make me wonder, that person that we assumed was Marsh at the end of book 1, was that actually him? I don't know what the implications of that would be, but yes, I'm very excited to get to the Lost Metal and just see where we're going with this. I'm on board, and I'm gonna go read the Lost Metal now. So thank you very much for tuning in. These have been my thoughts/reactions to the third book, The Bands of Mourning. That's the name. The last book is a little chunkier as well, so I'm excited to see what goes on there. It also comes with a PDF as an audiobook, which is a little interesting. I'm wondering if there's something I'm going to have to look at visually that can't really be explained audibly. Either way, I'll catch you in whatever I make next.